Most swimmers are told they need to eat like an athlete. But what does that actually mean? If you go online, you'll find overcomplicated meal plans, macro calculators, and supplement stacks that promise miracles. But almost none of it is practical or even relevant for real swimmers. In this video, I'm going to give you a simple evidence-based 4-tier nutrition system that works whether you're a master swimmer or a competitive age grouper. No fads, no extreme diets, just clear principles that will help you swim faster, recover better, and get more out of every single training session. But before we get into it, I need to make something clear. Nutrition will not make you fast by itself. Training makes you fast. Nutrition simply allows your training to work at its full potential. When your eating habits support your goals, you can actually hit the speeds and targets you set for yourself during practice, and you recover and adapt more effectively and faster between the sessions. But if your habits are off, you're putting a ceiling on your progress before you even dive in. And if you want to go deeper into the training side of the performance, the part that actually makes you faster, check out my free ebook, Training Principles for Master Swimmers. It walks you through the exact methods I use to structure training for speed, endurance, and long-term progress. You can download it for free using the link in the description. Now that we got that out of the way, let's start with Tier 1 energy availability. Because for performance, if I had to choose the single most important factor, it's this. Because if you don't eat enough, nothing else matters. It's really that simple. If you don't have enough energy, meaning calories, you won't be able to train hard and you won't have the raw materials needed to adapt to your training. Just like a race car won't move an inch without fuel, your body cannot produce performance or adaptations without sufficient energy. And yes, we can talk about what type of fuel is optimal, but first you need enough of it. Now, I'm not going to give you a specific calorie number because your actual energy needs depend on your body size, your gender, muscle mass, and training load. The goal is not to hit a perfect number, but to consistently eat enough to support your training and recovery. Because even small energy deficits compound over time. If you're not progressing in training the way you want, this is the first place to look. And yes, what you eat and when you eat matters, but only slightly compared to simply getting enough calories. That's why you see elite athletes with terrible diets, like Usain Bolt's famous McDonald's diet at the Olympics. Yet they still perform. If they cover their caloric needs, they're already 80% of the way there. Now, what if you need to lose weight? Yes, that will require a calorie deficit, but you want to do it as far away as possible from competitions where you need to perform and at a rate slow enough that you can still train hard and recover properly. It's never optimal for performance, but if you carry a lot of excess body fat, your body is providing some of that missing energy from the stored tissue. However, that still places stress on the system and will never be as effective as being properly fueled through food. So unless you have weight to lose, do not fear calories. If you train hard, you need them because you cannot train hard if you're running on tank that's half full. We all intuitively know this. When you're well fed, your motivation is high and you can handle tough sessions and bounce back quickly. That's exactly what we want. Never go hungry if your goal is peak performance. Tier 1 is simple in principle. You must eat enough to fuel your training. But in today's world, where many people are intentionally restricting calories or trying to lose weight, this is often the first place swimmers go wrong. And once you're consistently meeting your energy needs, the next step is to make sure that energy comes from the right sources. And that brings us to Tier 2, macronutrients. Proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and how to distribute them. While energy availability is widely agreed upon, Tier 2 is where opinions start to differ, but the science is actually quite clear. As long as you hit the minimal amounts required for bodily function and performance, there's a lot of flexibility in the margins. Let's start with protein, because this is the one macronutrient most swimmers misunderstand. Because protein isn't just for building muscle or getting bigger. It's the raw material your entire body is made from. Your heart, your blood vessels, your connective tissue, even your nervous system. And if you're training several times a week, especially if you're also lifting weights, you need enough protein not just to repair what training breaks down, but to build the improvements in your bodily systems that make you faster. And the minimum required intake is around 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, or about 0.7 grams per pound of body weight for my American viewers. More isn't necessarily better, but going under that on a consistent basis absolutely limits your ability to recover and adapt. Without enough of it, your body simply doesn't have the building blocks to improve. Getting the recommended amount is not really hard. You don't have to eat steak 6 times a day or live on protein shakes, because protein comes from all kinds of foods: eggs, dairy, beans, lentils, and even grain products like pasta, bread, and rice contribute to your daily total. Protein powders are fine, but they're just for convenience and not a requirement. And a simple and probably the most effective way to hit your daily target is to spread your protein intake evenly throughout the day. This keeps a steady supply of amino acids, the building blocks of protein, available for recovery and adaptation, which is what your body needs to actually respond to your training. So if you weigh 75 kilos or 165 pounds, your daily target is around 150 grams of protein. If you eat 4 meals a day, that means roughly 30 grams of protein per meal, and that gets you exactly where you need to be. And if you're vegan or mostly plant-based, you can absolutely hit these numbers. But you just need to be a bit more deliberate in making sure there's a protein source in every meal, and it's often smart to slightly overshoot your daily target to account for the lower protein quality in plant sources. The main point is this: protein ensures your training actually turns into progress. If you're not eating enough of it, your recovery is slower, your adaptation is limited, and your body starts breaking down tissue faster than it can rebuild it. And now let's talk about fats. Just like with protein, there's a minimum amount your body needs to function properly. And just for simplicity, aim for about 1 gram per kilogram of body weight or 0.45 grams per pound, because going below this for long periods can interfere with your hormones, your mood, your energy levels, and eventually your performance in the pool. And this is really not something you want to play around with. Now, eating more fat than this is totally okay as long as it's coming mostly from healthy sources. Things like olive oil, nut seeds, avocados, and fatty fish. And I think we all know what these are. But remember, if you go too high on fats within a fixed calorie intake, you automatically leave less room for carbohydrates, which are the main energy source for intense swimming. So the goal here is simply to hit the minimum amount of fat needed to support hormonal health and overall function. And beyond that, you can adjust your fat intake based on your personal preference and training demands. More fat isn't bad, as long as your total energy intake matches your goals. It only becomes an issue if you're eating in a surplus or pushing out the carbohydrates needed to fuel intense training. And that leads us to carbs, because this is where performance can either be fully supported or unintentionally limited. And this part is actually very straightforward. Once you met your protein and fat needs, carbohydrates fill the remaining energy requirement, especially if performance is your priority. But there is a spectrum here, and not everyone needs a super high carb diet. Like if you train 3 to 4 times a week for about an hour at a time, your carbohydrate needs are very moderate. Somewhere in the range of 3 to 5 grams per kilogram of body weight again, and that's about 1.5 to 2.2 grams per pound, is usually enough to support recovery while keeping you in the energy balance. As long as you include some carbs and avoid extremely low carb or ketogenic diets, your body will naturally replenish glycogen stores during the rest days. And in that scenario, you have the flexibility to include more fats and less carbs if you so prefer. However, if you train daily, or especially if you train multiple times a day, Carbohydrates become a major performance enhancer. They are your body's preferred and most efficient fuel during intense swimming. In those situations, carbs are your friends, and eating too little of them will directly limit your ability to get the most out of your training. In these cases, you're looking at 5 to 7 grams per kilogram of body weight, or 2.2 to 3.2 grams per pound, or even more, to fully support performance, sustain high quality training, and recover between sessions. Now, from a health perspective, it absolutely matters where your carbohydrates come from. Whole food sources provide nutrients and fiber, but from a performance perspective, especially in the short term, your body only sees glucose. Doesn't care if that glucose comes from a banana or from a sports drink, as long as the energy is there to refill the muscle glycogen and fuel your next session. So to put tier 2 simply, protein is what your body uses to rebuild and adapt, fats regulate your hormones and overall function, and carbohydrates fuel your training. If you get those 3 right and make sure your total energy intake matches your needs, you're already about 90% of the way there. And by the way, I am just making up these percentages as I speak, so do not take them as gospel. But I want you to understand the hierarchy. But there's still one final piece that can take you from doing well to truly maximizing your performance. But to emphasize it once more, it only matters once you're eating enough and hitting your macronutrient targets. And this last tier is highly individual, and that's why most people misunderstand it. And that's meal timing. And I want to make this clear from the start. There is no magic rule that says you must eat every 3 hours, or in the other end of the spectrum, there isn't anything magical about intermittent fasting. None of these methods are inherently good or bad. What matters is whether your meal timing helps you meet the tier 1 and tier 2 consistently, your total energy intake, and your macronutrient targets. If a certain eating schedule helps you to do that, great. And if it doesn't, it's not the right strategy for you. Meal timing is individual because how often you should eat depends on what you're eating in those meals. What a crazy concept. A protein shake and a piece of fruit digest quickly, so you'll need to eat again sooner. A large meal with steak, potatoes, and vegetables covered in butter digest more slowly, so the nutrients are released over a longer period of time. So instead of following a strict schedule someone posted online, base your meal frequency on how each meal feels and how it affects your training. And as a general guideline, most people perform best when they spread their meals fairly evenly throughout the day. You don't want long periods with no energy coming in, but you also don't need to graze constantly. For most swimmers who are awake about 16 hours a day, hopefully, eating about every 4 hours is a great starting point. That usually results in about 3 to 5 meals per day. And fewer than 3 meals often makes it hard to hit your targets, and more than 5 rarely adds any extra benefit. And the second layer of nutrient timing is about supporting your actual workouts, both fueling the sessions and then recovering from it. And this becomes increasingly important the more frequently you train. If you train once a day, nutrient timing might give you a small benefit. But if you're training twice a day or doing multiple intense sessions back to back to back, carb timing becomes more important. In those cases, you don't have the luxury of long recovery windows, so you need to replenish energy quickly in order to perform again within the same day. That's why it makes sense to center carbohydrates around your training sessions. The meal before training should include carbs to give you available energy, and the meal after training should also emphasize carbs to replenish glycogen and kickstart recovery. If you're training less frequently with plenty of time to recover, your body will take care of this naturally, as long as your total daily intake is sufficient. But if your training frequency or intensity goes up, Timing becomes the difference between progressing and hitting plateaus. Now, there's one thing very specific to swimming that most people don't talk about. Swimming happens in a horizontal position, and that makes gastric stress much more likely. Many swimmers simply cannot eat a large pre-workout meal without experiencing discomfort, cramping, heartburn, or something that ruins the entire session. And while the idea of a pre-training meal is good in theory, the carbs you use in your session were actually delivered to your muscles several hours earlier. So if eating close to training hurts your performance, it's not worth it. And I'm one of those people. If I eat even a piece of fruit within 3 hours before a swim, the heartburn will completely ruin the session. And that's the key point. Meal timing is personal. The right timing is the one that lets you perform your best in the pool. If a certain pattern boosts your energy, focus, and speed in training, that's probably the right approach for you. And if you optimize the first 3 tiers, you're eating enough to fuel your training, you're hitting the right amounts of protein, fats, and carbs, and you're timing your meals in a way that supports performance and recovery, you are already doing what actually drives most of your progress. These 3 tiers take care of almost everything that moves the performance needle. Now we get to the very tip of the spear: supplements. This is the part that swimmers love to focus on, even though it contributes the least. And I'm going to be blunt here. If you aren't consistently meeting your calorie needs, hitting your macros, and eating in a way that supports your sessions, supplements are the last thing you should be worrying about. Yes, creatine and caffeine works, and sports drinks can be useful during long sessions even when your nutrition is not on point. But understand that supplements are not the foundation of performance. They are simply tools you can use to make your training slightly more effective over time, for example by consuming sports drinks during a 2-hour practice, cover a nutrient deficiency because you're not getting that from food. Say the sight of any seafood makes you gag, and that probably would mean that you need an omega-3 supplementation. Make it more convenient to hit your macro targets, as it is much easier to grab a protein shake on the go rather than keep Tupperwares of chicken in your bag, or provide a very small performance boost in certain situations. And out of the hundreds of supplements marketed to improve performance, only 2 have consistently shown meaningful benefits: creatine and caffeine. Everything else is largely ineffective or even harmful. And even with these 2, the effects are small, especially in a technical sport like swimming, where skill execution have far greater impact than 1% boost in power. So the message here is clear. Supplements are polish, not the foundation. So do not let the pursuit of tiny gains distract you from executing the basics day after day, because that's where real progress is made. So yes, supplements can provide that final 1 or 2%, but only if the rest of your nutrition is already dialed in. And that brings us to the one final overarching principle that sits underneath this entire system. Not a tier on its own, but the foundation everything else depends on. And that's food quality. Because you may have noticed that up to this point, I haven't told you to eat specific foods or said anything about whether your carbs should come from fruit, whole grain pasta, or sports drink. And that's intentional. From a pure performance perspective, in the short term, your body only sees carbohydrates as glucose. Whether you got that glucose from a banana or from table sugar, your muscles don't really care during a training session. But in the long term, performance is built on health. And that's where food quality matters, and it matters a lot. You can't perform well consistently year after year if you're inflamed, lacking vitamins or minerals, constantly hungry, or struggling with weak immunity. So think of food quality as the foundation that supports all the other tiers. It's not a separate tier. It's the environment all the other tiers live inside. And it doesn't need to be complicated. Just eat like an adult. We all know what real food looks like. lean meats, fish, eggs, vegetables, fruits, berries, nuts, seeds, whole grains, milk products, and healthy fat sources. Processed food isn't automatically bad, but as a rule, most of what you eat should be minimally processed, made from single ingredients, or prepared from whole foods. You don't need to be obsessive or perfect, but having some awareness and a general commitment to quality will pay off massively over time. Not just in your health, but in your training consistency, recovery, and performance longevity. And this is the key point across every tier. Nutrition does not need to be perfect to be powerful. If you're consistently eating enough to fuel your training, hitting the basic requirements for protein and fats, filling the rest of your energy needs with carbs based on how hard and how often you train, and you're doing all of that using mostly real, minimally processed food, your body will reward you with better performance, better recovery, and steady progress over time. So keep it simple. Stay consistent. Don't stress over the small stuff. Nutrition is a long-term game, and when you build these habits into your lifestyle, the results compound year after year. And if you found this video helpful and you want more science-backed swimming content, make sure to like this video, leave a comment, and subscribe. And if you're serious about taking your swimming to the next level with personalized guidance, check out the link below for one-on-one coaching. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.